Well, welcome everyone to the last unit of this course. Hard to believe we're in the last unit already. So, as I believe you already know, we are starting ecology. And this is a picture that I got from the book. And for whatever reason, they chose it to illustrate ecology. However, I like the picture that I'm going to show you next better. And the reason I like it better is because I took it. So again, we have a whale in the water. This is a humpback whale, and it is in the waters right off the coast of Seward, Alaska. And I was there with my family in 2010, and it was just amazingly beautiful. And yeah, I had a student say, "Wow, Professor Dillon, you're a great photographer." Well, digital cameras work wonders. So you can't see it in this picture, but actually we came across a whole pod of these are humpback whales, and they were engaged in this cooperative behavior called bubble knitting. And what that means is that they would swim around in a circle, swim around in a circle, and being mammals, they would blow bubbles. That's what mammals, aquatic mammals do. They blow bubbles. And the reason they did this was to trap all the fish in the center, because the fish, if they tried to swim through this quote unquote bubble net, they would become confused and just swim back toward the middle where they weren't bubbles. Well, I'm not sure how they did it, but as this pod of whales was swimming around, bubble netting, I don't know if someone counted 1, 2, 3, but they would all just go underneath and swim up through the middle together, and they would all breach together. It was just a sight to behold. And so it was a neat sight, first of all, because of this cooperative behavior and to see these whales breach together. But another interesting thing is this: we knew exactly when and where to point our cameras, because even though we could not see the whales swimming beneath the surface of the water, there were some seagulls swimming up in the air, and they, literally had a bird's eye view. And when they could see these whales about to emerge, they would swoop down really fast to get the fish that were being forced to the top. So when we saw the seabirds settle on the surface of the water, we knew that the whales were about to breach. And this picture to me summarizes ecology, and which we'll see the definition right here, which is the scientific studies of interactions of organisms with each other and with their abiotic, their non-living environment. And so this is a nice little symbol for me. We had the whales interacting with each other, their own species. We had the whales interacting with the seabirds, and we had the whales interacting with the fish. And again, we talked about the bubbles and the water and the temperature and all sorts of good things like that. So what you're going to do, you're going to work through a little website that shows you all the key levels of organization in nature. Now, if you took Bio 151, you can see this on page 4 and 5 of your textbook. So yes, in biology, you're not allowed to forget anything, and certainly not in ecology. Now, the different levels of organizations is sort of our way of imposing order on nature. Nature has her own order, but we sort of like to impose order to help us study it better. Now, on your next quiz, you'll be responsible for knowing what all the different levels of organizations are and to be able to give me examples of each. But the study of ecology focuses on 3 key levels: the population level, the community level, and the ecosystem level. So this is probably the one we'll be talking about most, but we're going to also talk a lot about the other 2. So let's start with population. Now, this term should not be new to you. We defined this in the first part of Bio 152 when we talked about evolution. We talked about this was the smallest unit of organization that it could actually evolve. So do you remember the definition of a population? A population is a group of interacting organisms of the same species. So that's the key term here. A population is a group of organisms of the same species. Now, if we go up one level to the level community, this refers to all the populations in a given area. So now sometimes you might hear Dr. Dan talk about the UD community, and by the UD community, he would be referring to the faculty and the staff and the students and the administrators of the University of Dayton. But to a biologist, that would not be the UD community. No. In fact, that would just be one population because we're all Homo sapiens, right? So what would be some members of the biological UD community? See, I'm going to give you a a few seconds, and I want you on your lecture guide to think of as many populations as you can that live on the UD's campus. Are you ready? Begin. Hope you're thinking hard. All right, that's probably enough time. So, what did you think of? We already mentioned Homo sapiens. Did you think of, are there chipmunks on campus, for instance? Is there a chipmunk population on campus? Definitely a population of ghetto cats. They're all one species. Uh, what else? Maybe you've seen fruit flies let loose from one of our researchers' labs. A population of fruit flies on campus. Now, did you list as one of your population birds? Well, birds would not be a good answer because there are many different species of birds that you can find on campus. For instance, it's easy to find robins throughout the years. There's populations of robins, population of cardinals, population of house sparrows. Okay, likewise, if you wrote down trees, that would not be an optimal answer either. In fact, it would just be wrong because trees does not represent one population. So maybe you put down ginkgo trees, that would be good, or white pines, or red oaks. So hopefully you get the idea. And again, hopefully you didn't put something down like students because as much as you might think that faculty sometimes seem like an alien species, no, we are all the same species. All right, so students would not be a good answer, but humans, Homo sapiens, would be. So finally, we come to the ecosystem level. And the ecosystem is the community, that is all life in a given area, plus the non-living factors that influence that life. So there's our three basic terms for study of ecology. So an organism's environment is its surroundings, and the surroundings include both biotic factors and abiotic factors. Biotic factors are the other living things in an organism's environment, and abiotic, remember A means without, are the non-living factors in an organism's environment. So what are some biotic factors in your environment? Well, you might think, oh, your roommate, all right, your professors, the ghetto cats. All right, so in general, I mean, we could sit there and list every living thing in your environment, but again, in biology, we like to group things into categories. So here's some general categories of biotic factors. So one might include predators. Hopefully you don't have too many predators in your environment, but this is a common biotic factor. Prey species, pathogens. So here's a chance to go back and review. When you work through your study guide for this chapter, I'll say go back to Unit 2 and look up some pathogens that we've discussed and classify them. Are they bacterial pathogens? Are they viral, even though viruses aren't technically alive? Or are they protist? And if we want to continue with this alliteration theme, we could even add, how about parasites? So these are all examples of biotic living factors in an organism's environments. All right, abiotic factors. What did you write down for non-living things that would influence a plant growth? Hopefully you put down temperature. Another one might be rainfall. In fact, these two abiotic factors are probably the most important too. They determine the characteristics. They are the most important factors that determine the characteristics, the makeup of whole ecosystems. So whether you have a tropical rainforest or a desert or a deciduous forest, that depends a lot on the amount of rainfall in a given area and the temperature. But there are many, many other abiotic factors. For instance, how about acidity? pH would definitely affect what type of organisms could live in a certain area. Wind, something we might not think about, but that can influence an organism. Sunlight, with its many, many components. So here are just a few abiotic factors. You probably can think of a lot more, and there's more listed in your book. But I want to focus, no pun intended, on sunlight for a little bit. All right, this represents the electromagnetic spectrum. So you might remember from this science class or another, all energy can be classified under three main umbrellas, if you will: kinetic energy, potential energy, and radiant or electromagnetic energy. Now, different components of the electromagnetic spectrum have a huge impact on living organisms. And I thought it's important to go over because sometimes people don't really understand that visible light and ultraviolet light and radio waves, so, well, they're the same type of physical phenomenon. It's just a matter that some of these waves have shorter wavelengths and are more energetic, and some are longer and less energetic. But all of these things are basically the same physical phenomena, that is radiant or electromagnetic energy. And you will work through another website that gives sort of fun facts about each type of electromagnetic energy and how they influence living organisms. So let's go review a few key characteristics of any electromagnetic wave. So electromagnetic energy or radiant energy is energy that travels as waves through empty space. They all travel at c, which represents the speed of light. So you've all heard of that famous Einstein equation, E equals mc squared, where c equals the speed of light. Do you know what the speed of light is? All good science majors should know that. What is it? 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second? Something like that. All right, 186,000 miles per second. But this isn't just the speed of light. This c represents the speed of any electromagnetic radiation. So ultraviolet travels at c, radio waves travel at c, microwaves travel at c. All electromagnetic waves travel at c, which we usually define as the speed of light. By the way, this light travels so quickly that it can circle the Earth at the equator 5, 6, 7.5 times in just 1 second. So that's pretty darn fast. All EM waves are generated by a vibrating electrical charge. Now let's think about it. Do you have electrical charges in your body? Well, of course you do. You're made up of molecules, which are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons, and are the molecules that make up your body at absolute zero? Well, absolutely not. The molecules in your body are vibrating, and as these electrical charges are vibrating, they are vibrating at just the right frequency to generate a type of electromagnetic energy that we call infrared or heat waves. So yes, your body generates body heat. Okay, electromagnetic energy has both a wave and a particle nature, and it literally took a genius to figure this out, namely Albert Einstein, that figured that certain physical phenomena could only be explained if we recognize that light has both a wave nature and sort of a packet nature. And we call these little packets of EM energy photons. And if you studied photosynthesis, you remember these little photons coming down and smashing into the photosystems. All right, but for right now, I want to focus on ultraviolet. So let's remember a few things about ultraviolet. Why do we not like UV energy? Well, it is mutagenic, and hopefully you recall mutagenic means it can cause mutations. In other words, it can change the very nature of our DNA. It can change our genetic code. Because it is mutagenic, so that's how energetic it is. It is more energetic than visible light. By the way, I'm going to mention my little pet peeve here, what I'm thinking about. If we go back to our EM spectrum. Now, I don't know why they don't list microwaves, but microwaves should be right here in between infrared and radio waves. Now, have you ever heard anybody say, ooh, stay away from the microwave oven, you might get hit by those microwaves, ooh. Now look at this, microwaves are less energetic than visible light. Now, does anybody ever say, ooh, stay away from that light bulb, you might get hit by photons of visible light? No, we don't care, because visible light is not energetic enough to mutate our DNA. And they are. Invisible light is more energetic than microwaves that some people are so afraid of. So next time somebody gives you that song and dance, just say, you know, they're less energetic than light, and we don't worry about standing near a light bulb, do we? Now, ultraviolet is more energetic, and that is a totally different story. So back to our UV story. UV rays are mutagenic, and anything that is mutagenic is also carcinogenic, meaning that it can cause cancer. We also don't like UV because it promotes aging. It promotes premature wrinkles. I once saw a picture on National Geographic where it showed this Native American woman who was out in the sun for her whole life. She was only mid-30s. She looked 80. She was so wrinkly. And on the other side of the picture was this Buddhist monk who literally was 80, and his face was as smooth as the baby's behind. Again, exposure to UV, that's what gives you wrinkles. So we don't like any of this stuff. However, UV also is what allows our body to convert our cholesterol molecules into vitamin D. It catalyzes this reaction. So, before the advent of vitamin D fortified milk, it was important for humans to be able to absorb some UV, because if we did not absorb UV, we could not convert our cholesterol molecules into vitamin D, vitamin D is actually a hormone that's necessary for life. All right, now there is so much UV coming from the sun and hitting the planet Earth that we would just be totally destroyed by the UV. It would just zap the heck out of us, mutate the heck out of our DNA, cause us cancer. But fortunately, around planet Earth, there is this thin layer of ozone that absorbs about well over 90% of the ultraviolet light. So until there was an ozone layer around the Earth, no terrestrial life, no life on land was possible. So it's not a coincidence that life originated in the oceans. If you ever played at the beach, so if your legs are underwater, the UV, your legs won't get burned. It's UV that causes sunburn too. They're protected under the water. UV cannot penetrate into water very far, but anything above the water gets zapped by UV. So, as you recall, the original Earth's atmosphere did not have any oxygen of any kind, no O2, no O3, which is ozone. It wasn't until photosynthesis cranked out oxygen and allowed O2 molecules to develop in our atmosphere, and then some of those collided and formed O3 until there was ozone. No terrestrial life, no life on land was possible. So scientists in the mid-1970s became disconcerted when they realized that our ozone layer was thinning. And you may know, or you'll read about later, this is caused by our production of CFCs, fluorocarbons, which are the active ingredient. Well, it used to be in aerosols like deodorant and certain hairsprays. And scientists sort of figured out that, you know what, preserving our ozone layer, which is necessary for all life on land, is probably more important than worrying about a bad hair day or BO. So that's in the 70s. If you have parents who are like late 40s, 50s, ask them what their favorite aerosol deodorant was. What did they spray on in the mornings? Now it's pretty much switched to roll-on. And again, if you have a hairspray, it's either a pump or they don't use CFCs as an aerosol. So we don't have to worry about that. But CFCs are still used as, like Freon is in air conditioning and refrigeration. And we can't live without refrigeration. So the ozone level has been thinning, but fortunately, since we've banned some use of CFCs and tightly regulated the other, there's hopeful signs that it's starting to regenerate, and that would be a really good thing. All right, this is another fun trivia fact. Bees can see ultraviolet. We cannot see it technically. It's out of the range of our perception. And that's an interesting word to realize, perception. Because when we go back to this EM spectrum, all right, we show these different colors here, but actual light really has no color. What light has is different wavelengths, longer and shorter wavelengths. So if, now this is coming to you from a computer screen, but if someone's shirt looks red to you, what's going on here? Maybe we should switch to a pointer here. What that means is that the longer wavelengths of light are being reflected off of that shirt, and then as the other ones are being absorbed, the reflected ones are being enter your eyeball. Yeah, this is my lovely eyeball. And they go to the back of your eyeball called the retina, and they stimulate the retina to send an electrical impulse. It goes through the optical nerve to your brain. Yes, and your brain interprets its sensation as red. So again, if a shirt appears red to you, that means the longer wavelengths, again, light itself has no color. It's the longer wavelengths that are being reflected from the shirt, entering your eyeball. They are sensed by the retina. They send an electrical impulse to your brain, and your mind interprets the sensation as red. When you look at a blue shirt, there are shorter wavelengths. Yeah, that's not a very good picture. That are being reflected to your eye. And these short wavelengths all right, as they enter your eye, hit your retina, they send a different electrical impulse to your brain, and your brain interprets this sensation as blue. So one of my favorite puns is, get ready for this, is color is simply a pigment of your imagination. Yeah, I told you it was bad. But the point is this, color is actually a psychological phenomena, not a physical phenomena. So you psychology majors should be very interested in this. Now you'll notice ultraviolet is just right off of our range of visual perception. Well, as it happens, that UV will actually stimulate the retina to send an electrical impulse to our brain. Weird thing. Our mind refuses to acknowledge the stimulus. So, I mean, if radio waves hit our eyes, nothing happens. Microwaves, nothing happens. But if UV, certain wavelengths at least, stimulate our retina, they will send an electrical impulse to our mind, and our mind won't just not even acknowledge it. Isn't that weird? And I think there's some adaptive value on that because we tend to look at things that we can see, and UV is mutagenic, so we really don't want to be looking into that. All right, but there are some swamis in California who claim they can actually see UV. And you know what? I believe them because they don't claim to see radar or X-rays or anything like that. So maybe they can override this mind block here, which sort of gives you the question to ponder. Well, imagine a color that you can't perceive. That's sort of an interesting thing. However, even though we cannot see UV, it is well documented that bees can perceive UV. And if you take pictures of flowers using only UV light and UV sensitive film, you will see patterns that we humans cannot see. And some of these flowers to our eye look actually dull and boring, but to the bees, bee can see quite exciting patterns, and these patterns pretty much direct them to where the nectar is. So again, read that article about electromagnetic radiation and how the different wavelengths are significant with living things. All right, the next part of your lecture guide, the players of the ecosystem, herbivores, carnivores, omnivores. You've heard this since 4th grade. You can review that on your own. What will we end this segment with is the idea of trophic structures. So troph, you might remember, means feeding or eating. Now, once again, I think trophic structures are just humans' attempt to organize nature. I mean, nature is what nature is, but we have to put everything in these little groups and categories. So what exactly does a trophic structure tell us about an ecosystem? Simply put, it tells us who eats whom, because basically it represents the feeding relationships of an ecosystem. Now, why do you eat? Well, you eat food for 2 reasons. One is to get energy, and the other is to get more matter, more of the chnops of life, more particles. How did you grow from being a little person into a big person? By eating food. Grow big and strong, just like your mom told you to. All right. Point is, if you know the feeding relationships of an ecosystem, you also know the energy flow through the ecosystem and the chemical cycling of an ecosystem. Now, the trophic structures we will discuss in the course. One is the food chain and its cousin, the food web, and the second is the ecological pyramid. So at this point in time, I will stop this presentation so I can talk about a food chain using the whiteboard or the smartboard. So I'll see you then, or see you there.